Thank you, organizers. In fact, Malgaji and Jennifer has been following up very meticulously with me. The webinar on genetics and genetic disorder is a conceptual thought process, in my opinion. All that relates to the epigenetics and environmental factors, which plays the genes to mutate, as well as their behavioral changes. My talk today is especially working on microenvironment, which relates in the infertility, the pathways involved, how they make responsible that insulin resistance plays a major role in the infertility. Me, as an Pradeep Mahajan, as an associate professor of surgery and faculty at the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, and I'm also a board certified physician of regenerative medicine from US. The establishment of overall my presentation today is based on my research, which I do at my lab in Navi Mumbai. The role of insulin resistance, how it causes a negative impact on various mechanisms of infertility. If we see the list of them, how it involves this insulin resistance into every step of from ovulation to fertilization, this insulin resistance relates to the mitochondrial function, which has a lot of value to understand the science. The interaction between insulin resistance, hypergonadism, obesity, these basic three terms, if you see analyze, it malfunction of the energy metabolism. And fortunately, human beings run their energy metabolism 80% on carbohydrates, which is very important for us to understand, which leads to steps following each other cascade, you can say. Follicular development abnormalities, poor oocyte qualities, ovulation which is not normal, endometrial function is hampered, which also affects the embryonic development, risk of thrombosis, poor embryo quality, non-fertilization, increased risk of abortion, mitochondrial dysfunction, apoptosis, granulosa fossil formation. And remember, the technology which I am going to talk to you today is mitochondrial dispensing interface, or you can call it microinsulin dosing system. When we talk of insulin resistance, we always talk of two important terms. One is hyperglycemia, second is hyperinsulinemia. Unfortunately, all the infertility experts and endocrinologists, when you ask them, they will talk these two terms. In my opinion, these are the biochemical parameters which reflect to say there is something wrong in the insulinic mechanism and carb metabolism. Beyond that, they will not execute to as a cause. So I don't believe that could be the cause of it. Like, we need to focus on role of insulin and caused resistance, where it comes from. It is an energy homeostasis in the entire gonadal spermatogenesis, production of sex hormone, binding globulins, and most of the cascade involved. Hyperinsulinemia is very well known in every chronic disease as well as obesity. or even increased ovarian androgen production. Insulin signaling effect on hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, as well leading to obesity related fertility. If you see a diagram which I have shown you, it doesn't leave any organ in the body which is not responsible to have dysfunction or malfunction because of insulin resistance. The overall cycle of role of insulin in the body is tiredness of beta cells or cells of Langerhans in the pancreas in the response of excess carbohydrate. So here we label them as carbohydrate dysmetabolism. Regulation of insulin leads to an over excess of carb, a resistance in the obesity, increased androgen synthesis, impact of reproductive axis. And remember, the energy battery of our body, mitochondria, goes dysfunctional, which leads to subfertility in most of the patients. Now, as I said you about the insulin resistance, mitochondria not getting the enzymes to process carbohydrate is insulin resistance. How many of you can understand this? There is no role of hyperglycemia or hyperinsulinemia here. It is the mitochondria which is supposed to have an pulsatile design production of insulin with the food or without the food, which keeps the Krebs cycle, that is metabolic citric cycle or TCA cycle, which we all learned in our medical schools, fundamentally at good health. If without proper metabolism and obesity, this process gets haywire. Now, why it should get haywire? There is a strong relationship between the pancreatic insulin pulsatile microdose oscillatory dispensing of the insulin and insulin resistance. I repeat my sentence: pulsatile microdose oscillatory microdose insulin dispensing from the pancreas has a close relationship in the insulin resistance. This factor which I'm telling you right now, keep in the mind when we go ahead to say why mitochondria plays a major role in insulin resistance. Now, insulin resistance, also many of them call as a metabolic syndrome. It has got impact on various considering factors, but I will not put a lot of time here in this metabolic syndrome. We'll go to the next slide. This metabolic syndrome also is a result of increase in ROS and decrease in ATPs. Why this increase in ROS, reactive species, and decrease in ATPs takes place? To call it as to be metabolic, it is a part of metabolic syndrome. Cells becoming resistant to insulin, metabolism shift to high lipid use. This is the first step where insulin resistance is placed because the beta cells have become tired of pulsatile insulin secretion, oscillatory, microdose at a specific pressure that is 1000 osmol. The pressure comes down with a synchronized compression or dispensing of the insulin at the pulsatile less than 1000 osmol. Shift to high metabolism, high lipid metabolism, that is free fatty acid breakdowns or protein breakdowns. This is the first step where you have to realize that something is wrong for the insulin which is secreting. It is there, it is being produced, but it is not releasing certain enzymes from GLUT4 receptor in the liver, which leads to loss of ATP production and increase in free fatty acid levels, lactates, pyruvates, which represents as the insulin resistance. And free fatty acids, when they break down, they use an excess of oxygen radicals, molecules, to produce excess of ROS. This ROS increases in a tremendous amount. Though we require RSS as a biostimulating factor in a small amount in the normal cycle of Krebs. But here, the ratio becomes much reverse. And the ATP synthesis goes down by 60 to 70%. Now, body starts fighting with increasing ROS and required energy, which is very poor, which is not coming up. The tiredness leads to body's complete downregulation. Reproductive organs, remember again, in reproductive organs, they are the organs requiring a huge amount of energy because they are the organs which are going into functional new life creation. So decline metabolic health is the first step which speaks that my reproductive organs, which are supposed to be fertile, are becoming subfertile. My energy source is going down. My ROS are increasing. And this is called the insulin. Subsequently, I'll define in more better way for you how exactly what happens at the mitochondrial level, particularly electron transport chain and matrix. The defect comes at the electron transport chain, which is present between the inner ciliated lining and the external lining of the mitochondria. This ROS increase leads to oxidative stress, imbalance in the antioxidants, cytoplasm where the mitochondrial enzyme activity goes down, impairs mitochondrial function. Now, having known this, the mitochondrial picture, you see, they are the energy house of our body. We have been taught as energy house, but let me tell you, mitochondria has got multiple roles to produce enzymes, cholesterol, signaling factors, proteins, and what not required for the signals to give the nucleus as all the cytoplasmal contents also. Molecular level insulin works. One, insulin signaling pathway, insulin signal binding receptors, and PL3K is activated by insulin receptor 1 to generate 3,4,5 triphosphates. For glucose uptake by glycogen synthesis and protein synthesis. Look, here we are going into molecular pathways of insulin, where we can relate ourselves. Insulin is going into a wrong cycle of lactogenesis. Skeletal muscles, hepatocytes, pancreatic beta cells, adipocytes are the one which has got excessive number of IR receptors, which play a role in insulin resistance. The pathway of activation I already explained you. Inflammatory cytokines, free fatty acid breakdown, saturated fatty acid increasing, and endoplasmic reticulum going into stress. Now here in this picture, the PPT level, if you can see two pathways, one ATP production in the cytoplasm by glycolysis, where two molecules of ATPs are produced. In pyruvate reaction, it produces another two. And in Krebs cycle, it produces 34. So almost 32. Almost one glucose molecule produces 36 ATPs and a small amount of ROS in a strong regular ATP pathways. Whereas the moment this cycle becomes towards the free fatty acid production because of lack of liver producing 43 enzymes because of mechanoreceptors GLUT4. Insulin pulse has gone down, receptor doesn't work GLUT4, body requires the energy, Krebs cycles, they cannot go in the standard production. So the cycle starts with with the TOC1 receptors going down regulation and going into free fatty acid production using free fatty acids, and which leads to inflammation, ROS. Now, this is a complex mechanism which is going between cytoplasm and mitochondria, in the mitochondria matrix and the ETC cycle, in electron transport chain. There is a complex relationship here, and that is very important to understand to overcome insulin resistance. Here I have shown you in a diagram glycolysis going in the cytoplasm. Microbust insulin pancreas is producing at 1000 osmomole. GLUT4 receptors in the liver secreting enzymes. TOC1 receptor regulating the phosphorylation cycle, oxyphosphorylation. And whereas when the glycolysis takes upper hand and the pressure at 1000 osmol goes down, enzymes are not produced, ROS is increased. I'll show you the next slide where you can see the all insulin. Let me go back again to make you clear. Phosphorylation is a normal cycle producing 70 to 80%, 90% of the ATPase, whereas when the cycle reverses with the TOC1 receptor, it goes into phosphorylation down and ROS production above, increases up. That itself is responsible to lead insulin resistance. The basic concept is pancreatic, synchronized, pulsatile, microdose, oscillatory insulin secretion in the portal vein for activating GLUT4 receptor is insulin resistance. And the next level of insulin resistance, if it is maintained, and the next level in the pyruvate cycle and in the proton pump, which is in ETC, they also play a major role in insulin resistance. We were not knowing what I spoke just now. This is a science which I'm talking, has been researched out in 2002, all which is pulsatile burst insulin. We call burst insulin. We used $1 billion to understand the drugs development, but we never thought to study the organ, what is happening. And I trust you, if we could have seen what is happening at organ level, we could have, by this time, taught millions of life going to diabetic complication. Insulin does to fertility. What does insulin resistance does in fertility, which already I have explained you, energy hemostasis, which involves in the gonadal steroidogenesis, inhibiting production of hormones, particularly binding globulin, is the first step. Second, hyperinsulinemia, obesity. Insulin is increasing because it is not at the pressure of 1000 osmomole. It is not releasing the 43 enzymes from the liver. So insulin is increasing. But because there is no pressure, insulin goes into hyperinsulinemia. At the same time, because glucose is not going to Krebs cycle, glucose level is increasing and the energy is produced by free fatty acids with the increased ROS and decreased ATPs. This is the ideal picture in subfertility. Fertility in the females, aging of the organs goes very accelerated. And this is a basic reason of increased ROS, microangiopathy, poor immune response, as well reduced hormonal response. You can see infertility leading to miscarriages. Ovary, endometrium, both are not responding. In insulin resistance increases gonadotrophic damage, whereas gestational diabetes also comes into picture because of this only. In PCOS, the pathology remains the same. Death cycle, insulin, and testosterone fuel each other, increasing testosterone level, that is hyperandrogenemia and hyperinsulinemia, directly proportional to each other. Insulin resistance in polycystic syndrome, which already I have explained you, the same thing I have presented you in a cyclical form. Pancreas, increased glucose, receptors, androgen, decreased hormones, the SIBG hormones, and as ovarian theca, where the insulin resistance is putting a poor response. Standard process of to reduce insulin resistance in general. Now, all overall, I have understood make you understand insulin resistance here. A step ahead, the failure of proton pump. I repeat my sentence. Failure of proton pump to produce ATPs due to lack of gradient of proton cycle, proton movement in the ETC is ideally called as insulin resistance. Let me go to the molecular level. And this we try to correct by having some kind of dietary changes, weight management, pharmacological management, exercises, physiotherapy. All they do require definitely, but they cannot change the basic pathology which I spoke you just now. Interventions of pharmacology, we know there are a lot of limitations in the standard care. Medicines like metformin, letrozole, clomiphene, yeah, they do give some benefit to the extent. But if you want to correct the molecular science here, we need to add something which is related to mitochondria. Gonadotropin treatments, I may not talk a lot on that because people have spoken, people know the standard practice of infertility. Intervention strategies typically used. Those also, all of them know laparoscopic ovarian drilling in PCOS or LOD. Surgical management also is regulated by the people, they are doing it, but they have their own limitation. Here I would like to introduce to you, this is microdose insulin, MDI. Now this device at StemRx is making real changes in the insulin resistance. The pancreas various failed because of over tiredness to the hypercarbohydrate response, leading to obesity, increased ROS, and decreased ATPs and mitochondrial function. Takes up the science of insulin resistance. And if you want to come out, I need a pancreas which will produce, synthesize, pulsatile, oscillatory, and microdose in a front way of insulin, leading to the GLUT4 receptors and releasing enzymes which normalizes carbohydrate metabolism. Time has come to rewrite the medicine to understand the pancreatic function from a standard teaching. Now, in a standard teaching, we always think pancreas is a cause. Pancreas is continuously producing insulin. Pancreas produces insulin only to the food response. And we always feel insulin is produced continuously. This is totally a myth. It produces pulsatile insulin, which metabolic enzymes in the liver produce crave cycle into action using TOC1 receptor. On the contrary, in the sleep, the pulse of secretion of insulin is higher than the day activity. Now, this particular device is quicker and easier to generate ATP from glucose than fatty acids. This is what I wanted to do here. And which changes my ratio of ATP synthesis. This burst is important. So I call microburst of insulin with 1000 osmol pressure, oscillatory, straightforward at regulated interval of 6 to 10 minutes, depending on your food type. You can have any food. It's not that if you eat only carb, this can be increasing. No, absolutely myth. Now, what are the dispensing interface, the mitochondrial dispensing interface? What are the causes? Like when we take as a normal part of it, the pro-inflammatory cytokines has to go down completely. Reduce automatically inflammatory cytokine, which is a primary requirement. And at the same time, we need to increase ATP synthesis. This is the overall mechanism which I have shown you. Glucose going up, free fatties going up, ketone, lactate, which are also going up. If you do test in this patient, you will find pyruvates and lactates are increasing. Reactive oxygen species increases. Transcription factors involved in these increases. Mediators for inflammation are increases in an abnormal metabolic response where the mitochondrial dysfunction takes place. An immune response goes down, infection disseminates, which ultimately an overall effect goes to the reproductive organ, altered tissue reproductive system. Now, when it goes a long period, the tissue response is very poor. The overall mechanism of my technology, which I am working on, which goes beyond genetic repairs also, beyond factors, standard care also, and replaces the entire micrometabolism of mitochondrial dysfunction in Krebs cycle, producing high levels of ATPs and low levels of ROS, which we require as a signaling factor for some of the reactions. Results amazing, amazing, amazing. The improvement in the ovarian function, you can continue your metformin, no problem. Emerging such therapies restores insulin level, enhances reproductive outcomes. Overall result, the infertility at the ovarian level, infertility at the axis of fertility at endometrial level, all are reboost to the normal level. This all has been collected from a specific, most selective references, which I'm enlisting here. Those who are interested to know about it, what is pulsatile insulin resistance or release, what is glucagon release, pulsatile, glucose-induced amplitude regulation of pulsatile insulin, or pulsatile delivery. Those who are interested to know this, they can always note down at the end of my presentation my contact numbers as well as email address. And now you should think a new dimension and changing paradigm to manage the infertility as universal solution as microdose insulin. Whether it's a oocyte problem, with the endometrium problem, other infertility problems, issues, or PCOS or OD is there. My dear friends, it was a wonderful experience to take you to journey of new thought process, research which is coming up ahead as a mitochondrial dysfunction as a primary problem, and without that correction, you do any kind of technologies with the standard care, your infertility problems cannot be resolved because you are in a unique situation of increasing ROS and decreasing ATPs. So my email address is given here. My contact number is given here. My YouTube YouTube visits are there. You can visit those YouTube also. Try to connect me. Those who have questions right now, they can ask me questions. This is beyond genetics, using the normal physiological function, reboosting the pancreas, removing the insulin resistance at a peripheral level, at GLUT receptors and TOC1 receptors, which are present in almost all organs. Thank you for patient hearing.